On behalf of the Menace Festival team and Menace School of Music of the New Schools College of Performing Arts, I would like to welcome you all to the second concert of our musical journey through American history, from Charles Ives' Onward. Through the works of 17 composers, we'll explore the continuing evolution and diversity of the American musical scene. We hope you'll enjoy this concert and look forward to seeing you at the next one, a celebration of jazz, an event curated by our Dean of the School of Jazz, Keller Coker. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our patrons for their generosity and enthusiastic support. Charles Ives stands out as one of America's groundbreaking composers and one of the most original spirits of his time. Passionate and talented for music as a child, Ives would study at Yale with Horatio Parker. Yet, on graduating, he was convinced he could not earn a living with his kind of music. He became hugely successful in business as head of the largest insurance agency in the country, but felt compelled to go on composing at every free moment available to him. This frenetic pace took its toll. And a psychologically and physically exhausted 44-year-old Ives suffered the collapse which eventually ended his creative life. The future found him revising earlier works and mentoring young musicians. The sources of Ives' tone imagery are to be found in the living music of his childhood. Hymns, popular songs, the town band at holiday parades, the fiddlers at Saturday night dances, patriotic songs, the melodies of Stephen Foster, the medleys he heard at country fairs. His insistence on following his own path as an experimental composer led him to the polytonality, atonality, polyharmony, cluster chords, and polyrhythms, which he felt were the fundamental elements of much of the American music and its performances of his childhood. Thus, in the last years of the 19th century, when Schoenberg was still writing in a post-Wagner idiom, when neither Stravinsky nor Bartók had yet to begin their careers, we find this extraordinary musician composing in artistic isolation to be the most advanced in musical concepts, opening the paths that 20th century music would eventually follow. Initially, it was in Europe that Ives' music was recognized. However, in 1939, the tide finally turned in the United States with the American pianist John Kirkpatrick's several triumphant performances of the Concord Sonata, hailed by one critic as the greatest music ever composed by an American. Ives was 65, while a younger generation of composers, such as Henry Cowell, Wallingford Rieger, and Nicholas Limsky, were already showing his influence. The general public as well finally discovered him. Ives was hailed as the grand old man of American music. And with the performance of his Pulitzer Prize-winning Third Symphony, Ives awoke at 73 to find himself famous. His Second Symphony also was heard with the New York Philharmonic Leonard Bernstein conducting, half a century after its creation, causing Bernstein to remark, "We have suddenly discovered our musical Mark Twain, Emerson, and Lincoln, all rolled into one." Still, the prospect of finally hearing the work performed agitated Ives. He attended neither the rehearsals nor the performance. He was one of the millions who listened to its radio broadcast. He died in New York City 3 years later at the age of 80. You're going to hear tonight the song Tom Sails Away, the third song of the set Three Songs of the War, written in 1917.
Scenes from my childhood are with me. I'm in the light behind our house upon the hill. A spring day sun is setting. Mother with Tom in her arms is coming towards the garden. The lettuce rows are showing Thinner grows the smoke o'er the town. Stronger comes the breeze from the ridge. 'Tis after 6, the whistles have blown, the mill train's gone down the valley. Daddy's coming up the hill from the mill. We run down the lane to meet him. But today, in freedom's cause, Tom sailed away for over there, over there. Scenes from my childhood are floating before my eyes.
A native of Albany, Georgia, Wallingford Rieger grew up in New York. A talented cellist, he was in the first graduating class of the Institute of Musical Art, later known as the Juilliard School. Following his studies at the Hochschule für Musik in Berlin, he returned to the United States teaching at various music colleges in New York State while pursuing a career as a composer, but recognition came slowly. When I undertook to create, it was in spite of my environment, he said. One of the first American composers to use the 12-tone technique, Rieger combined it freely with elements of the classical tradition in a uniquely personal way. As he explained, the idiom to me is secondary, depending on the nature of the musical idea. A man who writes dry music in the 12-tone technique will do so in any style. A friend of the pioneers of the American modern movement, Charles Ives, Carl Ruggles, Edgar Varese, and Henry Cowell, Rieger reminisced. We had rejected the neoclassicism of a war-weary Paris and had struck out for ourselves, each in his own way. We formed the Pan American Association of Composers and gave, at a tremendous expense of time and energy, numerous concerts both here and abroad. It was only in his 60s that Rieger himself was recognized as one of the truly important American composers, having composed in all genres, including contemporary dance music. You'll hear tonight several short pieces from his piano cycle, New and Old. The distinguished critic and composer Virgil Thomson declared in 1950, Henry Cowell's music covers a wider range in both expression and technique than that of any other living composer. Thomson found Cowell's achievement as experimental composer and prestigious teacher to be like no other. Composer, pianist, music theorist, teacher, publisher, impresario, Cowell began composing at 14, searching for the new, guided by his intuition alone, until 1914 when he was admitted to the University of California, Berkeley, as a protege of the eminent musicologist Charles Seeger. 2 years later, studying in New York, Cowell met the radically futurist composer pianist Leo Ornstein. Seeger had persuaded Cowell to study traditional harmony and counterpoint, also urging him to formulate a theoretical framework for his innovations, resulting in his book, New Musical Resources, published in 1930. It became a major influence on American avant-garde composers, with John Cage proclaiming him the open sesame of new music in America. Cowell's tone clusters, groups of adjacent notes played simultaneously by the palm of the hand, the forearm, or a ruler, were the hallmark of his early piano style. Bartók requested permission to adopt the technique. The Tides of Mannanen, a prelude for a theatrical production, is the best known of Cowell's many tone cluster pieces. With his Aeolian harp and banshee, he continued his search for the new, now instructing pianists to pluck, strike, and scrape strings directly, a precedent later adopted by Ligeti and many electronic composers. Cowell's North American and European performances in the 20s of his various experimental seminal explorations in atonality, polytonality, polyrhythms, and non-Western modes brought him to public attention, being recognized as a prominent teacher of composition and theory as well. We're very proud that in the late 1920s, Henry Cowell taught at the New School, where his course, Music of World's People, reflected his desire, as he put it, to live the whole world of music. You're going to hear tonight the Tides of Mannanen and the Banshee. A banshee is a female spirit in Irish folklore who predicts the death of a family member by wailing, shrieking, or keening. This is the first piano piece composed for manual manipulation of the piano strings exclusively. Carl Ruggles, like Charles Ives, emerged into an artistic environment unready to receive him. This affected him profoundly. Lacking both a public to stimulate him and a demand for his music, he composed only a handful of works during his long life. After studying composition at Harvard with John Knowles Paine and 11 years of conducting an orchestra in Winona, Minnesota, Ruggles went to New York and became active at the International Composers Guild, which at the time represented the most advanced tendencies in American music. It was during these years that he wrote the 4 orchestral works on which his reputation rests: Men and Angels, Men and Mountains, Portals, and Sun Trader. In all works, Ruggles said, there should be the quality we call mysticism. All the great composers have it. Music for him had a symbolic meaning that is both poetic suggestion and emotion. He has been well called an apostle of ecstasy. Ruggles' need to communicate emotion led him to a harmonic language based on chromatic dissonance, which he regarded as the element expressive of tension. While his music may be characterized as atonal and thus bearing a certain relationship to that of the Viennese school, its source was different from that of Schoenberg and his disciples. You'll hear tonight his piano works Evocations 1 and 2, which exist also in an orchestral version. John Cage is the quintessential, eternally questing composer, music theorist, artist, and philosopher. A pioneer of indeterminacy in music, electroacoustic music, and non-standard use of musical instruments, Cage became one of the most influential composers of the 20th century. A native of Los Angeles, Cage studied with Henry Cowell at the New School and with Arnold Schoenberg in California. Though both exerted a strong influence on his thinking, Cage relinquished Schoenberg's tone row technique, convinced his own path forward lay in rhythm, and concentrating for the next 15 years on the overall structuring of time rather than pitch. As he said, I devised a rhythmic structure based on the duration not of notes, but of spaces of time. This strong interest in rhythm led Cage to explore the possibilities of percussion instruments and to his invention in 1938 of what he called the prepared piano, whose sound is altered by placing objects between or on its string or hammers. Cage described it as a percussion ensemble under the control of a single player. And he wrote a number of works for it, the major one, sonatas and interludes. Cage's music also reflects his involvement with Oriental thought in the late 1940s, when his studies of Indian philosophy and Zen Buddhism brought him to the composing of aleatoric or chance-controlled music. In these endeavors, he came to depend then and for the rest of his life on the I Ching, or Book of Changes, an ancient Chinese classic text using chance operations to suggest answers to questions raised in making decisions. In a 1957 lecture, Experimental Music, Cage would go on to describe music as a purposeless play, an affirmation of life, not an attempt to bring order out of chaos, nor to suggest improvements in creation, but simply a way of waking up to the very life we're living. We feel very proud that Cage not only studied at the New School, but from 1950 to 1960 was involved with academic courses here. First brought by his former teacher and New School faculty member Henry Cowell as a participant in performances in discussions from 1950 till 1960, he was a member of the faculty from 1956 to 1960. His experimental composition classes here became legendary as the American source of Fluxus, an international network of artists, composers, and designers. You'll hear tonight The Wonderful Widow of 18 Springs for voice and closed piano, written in 1942 on a text from Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce.
Night by silent sailing wildwood eyes and primrose hair, quietly, although wood so wild, in meadows of moss and daphne dews. How all so still she lay, 'neath of the white thorn, child of a tree. Like some lost happy leaf, like blowing flowers still, as fain would she anon, for soon again 'twill be, win me, woo me, wed me, oh weary me deeply. Now Sister Isabel, Sainte Isabel, Madame Isabel, la belle.
Johanna Bayer was born in Germany and graduated from the Conservatory in Leipzig. She moved to the United States in 1923 and studied at Manus, receiving 2 degrees by 1928. In the early 30s, she also studied with composers Ruth Crawford, Charles Seeger, and Dane Rudyard. In 1934, she took Henry Cowell's percussion class at the New School, where she developed a close friendship with him, serving as his informal manager and administrative assistant from 1936 to 1941 on a voluntary basis. While she was overlooked as a composer, Bayer's works did have a number of important performances. The first was at the New School in 1933, where her 3 songs for soprano, piano, and percussion were performed. A year later, the second movement from her suite for clarinet and bassoon was performed in one of Henry Cowell's New Music Society of California concerts. John Cage performed her 3 movements for percussion in his percussion tours during the late 1930s. In 1936, her skills in multiple media came to the fore in her play, The Modern Composer, for which she wrote the lyrics, composed the incidental music, choreographed the modern ballet, designed and created the costumes, slides, and advertisements, directed the production, and performed the piano part. The play was performed at the Central Manhattan Music Center, but manuscript sources for it have not yet been found. Her music was performed twice in the New York Composers Forum in 1936 and 1937, and was also part of the music event at the 1932 Summer Olympics. Although her music was overlooked during her lifetime and for decades after her death, it was some of the most experimental and prophetic work created in the 1930s. It reflects the aesthetics of the American ultramodernists, but with a very distinct personal style, characterized by an economic use of resources and balanced, well-structured forms. Her works for percussion ensemble are a major contribution to the development of new music. Bayer's Music of the Spheres is the first known work for electronic instruments by a woman composer. We are very proud that Johanna Bayer was an alumna of both Manus and the New School. You'll hear tonight her movement for double bass and piano. Samuel Barber is one of the most important and honored American composers of the 20th century. His music, masterfully crafted, of romantic structures and sensibility, is at once lyrical, rhythmically complex, and harmonically rich. Music critic Donald Hanahan stated, "Probably no other American composer has ever enjoyed such early, such persistent, and such long-lasting acclaim." Barber wrote his first piece at the age of 7, and at the tender age of 9 left this touching note for his mother. "Dear mother, I have written this to tell you my worrying secret. Now, don't cry when you read it, because it's neither yours nor my fault. I suppose I shall have to tell it now without any nonsense. To begin with, I was not meant to be an athlete. I was meant to be a composer, and I will be, I'm sure. I'll ask you one more thing. Don't ask me to try and forget this unpleasant thing and go and play football. Please. Sometimes I've been worrying about this so much that it makes me mad. Not very. Love, Sam Barber II." His sense of destiny was indeed prophetic. Barber attempted his first opera at age 10, entering the Curtis Institute at 14, where he studied voice, piano, and composition, while later studying conducting with Fritz Reiner. Barber wrote more than 100 songs, 3 operas, 3 concertos, 2 ballets, 2 symphonies, and a variety of significant orchestral, choral, chamber, and solo piano music. His music was championed by a remarkable range of renowned artists, musicians, and conductors, including Vladimir Horowitz, John Browning, Martha Graham, Arturo Toscanini, Dmitri Mitropoulos, Jenny Turrell, and Leontine Price, to name but a few. He was also the recipient of numerous awards and prizes, including the American Prix de Rome, 2 Pulitzers, and election to the American Academy of Arts and Letters. The intensely lyrical Adagio for Strings has become one of the most recognizable and beloved compositions, both in concert and film. Tonight, you'll hear his Nocturne for Piano, Opus 33. Hovhannes was one of the 20th century's most prolific composers, writing over 500 works. Of Armenian and Scottish descent, Hovhannes grew up in the Boston area, studying music at the New England Conservatory with Frederick Converse, having worked with Roger Sessions as well. As far back as his student days, he showed great interest in non-Western music. Listening to the Armenian composer Komitas, whom he described as the Armenian Bartok, Hovhannes learned to say as much as possible with the fewest possible notes. This was a radical path in the 1940s and one from which he rarely strayed. Hovhannes cites both his studies in the Far East and his exposure to the Indian dancer and choreographer Uday Shankar as the source of the mysticism in his music. But despite this influence, Hovhannes composed in a clear linear style. He once wrote, "I have always listened to my voice. I was discontented with the kind of music that everyone said I should write, all clever and dissonant, intellectualized. I wanted to write music that was deeply felt, music that would move people." Hovhannes wrote 67 symphonies, a wide variety of concertos, orchestral, solo instrumental, ballet music, unaccompanied choral music on predominantly religious texts, and a number of art songs. The Boston Globe music critic Richard Buell wrote, "Although he has been stereotyped as a self-consciously Armenian composer, rather as Ernest Bloch is seen as a Jewish composer, his output assimilates the music of many cultures. What may be most American about all of it is the way it turns its materials into a kind of exoticism. The atmosphere is hushed, reverential, mystical, nostalgic. Tonight you'll hear Chachagir for solo viola. Chachagir comes from the Hebrew word meaning torchbearer, which is one of the four pillars of the Armenian Orthodox Church. Norman Dello Gioio's family immigrated to New York from Italy. His father, an organist, pianist, composer, and prominent vocal coach at the Met, began teaching his son Norman the piano when the boy was 4 years old. At 14, the young musician was already the music director and organist at a church on City Island. He was accepted at the Juilliard in 1939 and studied composition with Bernard Wagenaar, becoming Paul Hindemith's student in 1941. Dello Gioio was a prolific composer in a variety of genres and received much recognition and numerous awards, including a Pulitzer Prize and an Emmy. The eminent music critic Edward Downes commented on his music. Norman Dello Gioio is outstanding for an outgoing directness of expression and simplicity of manner, if not always of means, which have an intentionally broad appeal. A strong melodic vein, a rhythmic vitality, a relatively restrained harmonic vocabulary, an infectious brio, and freshness of invention are among the earmarks of his style. Norman Dello Gioio served on the faculty of Manus, Sarah Lawrence College, and Boston University. Tonight you'll hear two movements from his piano work, Salute to Scarlatti. Vincent Persichetti is one of the major figures in American music of the 20th century, both as a composer and teacher. His music education began early when he enrolled at the Combs College of Music at the age of 5, studying piano, organ, double bass, music theory, and composition. He first performed his original works publicly at the age of 14. In addition to developing his musical talents, the young Persichetti attended art school and remained an avid sculptor until his death. He continued at Combs as an undergraduate, where after receiving a bachelor degree in 1936, he was immediately offered a teaching position. Age 20 found Persichetti head of both the theory and composition departments at Combs, a conducting major with Fritz Reiner at the Curtis Institute, and a student of piano and composition at the Philadelphia Conservatory. There he earned a master's degree in 1941 and a doctorate in 1945, having received a conducting diploma from Curtis. In 1941, still a student, Persichetti headed the theory and composition department as well as the Department of Postgraduate Study at Philadelphia Conservatory. In 1947, he was offered a professorship at the Juilliard, where he trained many noted composers, among them Lowell Lieberman, Richard Daniel Poor, Philip Glass, Steve Reich, Bruce Adolphi, Peter Schickele, Leo Brouwer, and Kenneth Fuchs, to name but a few. Persichetti was a prolific composer of more than 150 compositions in all genres, among them 9 symphonies, a huge number of piano works, other instrumental solo pieces, opera, chamber music, and choral works. He is also considered one of the major composers for wind band repertoire. Mr. Perschetti's aesthetic is a distinctive blend of classical, romantic, and modernist elements, contrapuntal, rhythmically charged, with a multifaceted and highly virtuosic imagination. Musicologist and critic Walter Simmons wrote, "Following the lineage of Mozart, Mendelssohn, and Ravel, Perschetti's music suggests the innocence and childlike joy of pure musical creativity." Tonight, you'll hear a movement from his piano sonata number 8. a composer and pianist, gained great recognition for his art songs. Showing a talent for music at an early age, Duke won a scholarship at 16 from Peabody Conservatory, where he studied both piano and composition. He graduated in 1918 and after the war debuted as a concert pianist, wrote his first art song and performed as a soloist with the New York Philharmonic. He joined the faculty of Smith College and gained a full professorship in 1936. During a sabbatical year in the late 1920s, he went to Europe, studying with Nadia Boulanger in Paris and with Arthur Schnabel in Berlin. While a very accomplished pianist, Duke chose to write primarily for voice, composing approximately 260 songs. When asked why, he answered, "I think it is because of my belief that vocal utterance is the basic of music's mystery." Tonight, you'll hear his song, Loveliest of Trees.
Loveliest of trees, the cherry now is hung with bloom along the bough, and stands above the woodland wide, wearing white for Eastertide. Come again, and from 70 springs a score, it only leaves me 50 more. And since to look at things in bloom, 50 springs a little room. About the woodlands I will go to see the cherry hung with snow.
Lowell Lieberman, composer and pianist, is one of America's most frequently performed and recorded living composers. He has written over 130 works in all genres, several of which have gone on to become standard repertoire for their instruments, such as his Sonata for Flute and Piano and Gargoyles for Piano, each of which have been recorded over 20 times on CD. His compositions are widely available on sheet music and on well over 100 major label recordings. Lowell Lieberman is the recipient of significant awards and has been commissioned by a wide array of ensembles and instrumentalists, including the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Emerson String Quartet, and flutist Sir James Galloway. His full-length ballet, Frankenstein, was co-commissioned by London Royal Ballet and the San Francisco Ballet and has been released on Blu-ray and DVD. Mr. Lieberman has also written 2 full-length operas, both enthusiastically received at their premieres. The Picture of Dorian Gray, the first American opera commissioned and premiered by l'Opéra de Monte Carlo, and Miss Lonely Hearts, based on the Nathaniel West novel commissioned by the Juilliard School to celebrate its 100th anniversary. We are very proud that Lowell Lieberman joined the composition faculty of Mannes School of Music in 2012, where he founded the Mannes American Composers Ensemble, MACE, devoted to performing works of living American composers. He was appointed head of the composition department the following year, a position he held for 5 years. In February, we celebrated his 60th birthday and the release on the Steinway & Sons label of his debut solo piano album, Personal Demons, which received rave reviews from American and European music critics. Tonight, you'll hear his Nocturne number 7. Gold Medal of Arts, Pulitzer Prize, and Grammy Award winner William Bolcom is one of the most important and versatile American composers. With works ranging from ragtime to opera, his remarkable eclecticism has earned Bolcom world renown. At age 11, he began studying composition at the University of Washington, later working with Darius Milhaud at Mills University, where he graduated with Masters of Music degree. After receiving a doctoral degree at Stanford University, he studied with Olivier Messiaen at the Paris Conservatoire. Bolcom was a distinguished professor of composition at the University of Michigan from 1973 to 2008. As a composer, Bolcom went through various stages. Early influences were Bartók, Boulez, Stockhausen, and Berlioz. However, in the 1960s, he began to explore a wide variety of musical styles, aiming to bridge classical and popular music. A large number of his song cycles were cabaret songs and were released in 4 volumes. As a pianist, Bolcom performed and recorded frequently with his wife, mezzo-soprano Joan Morris. Bolcom has composed 4 operas, 9 symphonies, 12 string quartets, concertos for a variety of instruments, including 4 violin sonatas, etudes, and rags for piano, organ works, and 3 musical theater pieces. His most monumental work, Songs of Innocence and of Experience, a setting of the William Blake poems, is a 3-hour-long work for soloists, choruses, and orchestra. Tonight, you'll hear 2 movements from his Suite No. 2 for solo violin. A Pulitzer Prize winner for music, a graduate of Curtis Institute in Philadelphia, a debut performance at New York's Town Hall, a soloist with Philadelphia Orchestra, a doctoral degree from Eastman School of Music, a tenure position at Smith College. The great composer and pianist George Walker was the first African American to have achieved all of this. At 14, Walker gave his first public recital at Washington's Howard University. He entered Oberlin College on a scholarship, graduating at 18. Then, at the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music, studied piano with Rudolf Serkin, composition with Samuel Barber, followed by 2 years with Nadia Boulanger in Paris in the late 1960s. In 1950, Walker had become again the first Black instrumentalist to secure major concert management with national concert artists. Still, though performing very successfully in America and Europe, opportunities were limited as white performers were often favored by managers, agents, and other gatekeepers. Walker's music, though firmly rooted in the modern classical tradition, also drew on African American spirituals and jazz. His compositions range broadly from intricately orchestrated symphonic works and concertos to intimate songs and solo piano pieces. His published catalog exceeds 80 works that include instrumental and vocal solos, chamber music, orchestral works, and choral music, many commissioned by such entities as the New York Philharmonic, the Cleveland Orchestra, the Eastman School of Music, the Fromm Foundation, the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Boys Choir of Harlem. Nearly every major orchestra in the United States has performed his work. Walker also had a long and distinguished academic career. We feel very proud that the New School offered him his first teaching position in 1960. After teaching at Smith College, the University of Colorado, the Peabody Institute at Maryland, and the University of Delaware, Walker became and remained the chair of the music department at Rutgers University in New Jersey until his retirement in 1992. Walker received 2 Guggenheim Fellowships, an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award, and honorary doctorates from 6 institutions. In 1997, Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Marion Barry declared June 17th George Walker Day. Tonight, you'll hear his 2 songs, Sweet Let Me Go and I Went to Heaven.
society.
Philip Glass is known as one of the seminal composers of the 20th and 21st centuries. The music critic of the Washington Post, Ann Midget, wrote in 2018, Philip Glass is mercurial, constantly changing, shifting, reinventing himself. A practicing Buddhist, he seems to embrace the idea that nothing is permanent. Glass himself said, I shift between mediums very frequently. Instead of taking a break from writing, I just write in a different medium or in a different way or for a different purpose so that I don't actually stop writing. I just go to something else. Like going from a big symphony to a piano piece is great and very refreshing, I find. I've been called a minimalist composer for more than 30 years, and while I have never really agreed with the description, I have gotten used to it. He now prefers to describe himself as a composer of music with repetitive structure. Glass studied at the University of Chicago at the Juilliard School and later in Paris with Nadia Boulanger, who had a great influence on him, while his trips to India would prove transformative of both his life and art. Glass has composed numerous operas and musical theater works, 12 symphonies, 11 concertos, 8 string quartets, as well as music for solo piano and other instruments, chamber music, and film scores. 3 of these have been nominated for Academy Awards. In 1968, Glass established the Philip Glass Ensemble. Our College of Performing Arts is proud to house the Philip Glass Institute and its ensemble in residence, the Philip Glass Ensemble. Tonight, you'll hear his piano etude number 3. youngest of the composers on our program tonight. Born in Manchester, New Hampshire in 1967 to parents of French-Canadian ancestry, Jalbert grew up in northern Vermont, hearing English and French folk songs and the Catholic liturgical plain song on which he would later draw. Asked if he considered himself an American composer given his background, he said, "I was born here, I grew up here, so I don't think I cannot be an American. It is just part of who I am. My French-Canadian heritage is also part of who I am." He considers George Crumb and Aaron Copland two major influences. Beginning piano lessons at the age of 5, Jalbert studied at Oberlin Conservatory, earning a PhD in composition at the University of Pennsylvania under principal teacher George Crumb. A recipient of many honors, including the Rome Prize, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and an award from the Academy of Arts and the Fromm Foundation Commission, his orchestral work, Ab Aeternum, chosen from over 1,100 works, received the BBC Master Prize in 2001. Jalbert also received the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center Stoger Award in recognition of his significant contributions to the chamber music repertory. Many of his chamber music works have been commissioned and performed by the Borromeo, Enzo, Ying, Pro Arte, and Emerson string quartets, as well as by soloist Midori. A composer of orchestral works, his music is being performed by major orchestras and soloists at venues such as Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and the Kennedy Center. The Boston Symphony under Seiji Ozawa highlighted Jalbert's work, the other composer being Aaron Copland. 3 new CDs of his work have recently been released. Jalbert, currently professor of music at Rice University Shepherd School of Music in Houston, is also co-founder of Musica, a Houston-based new music collective. Tonight, you'll hear his toccata for piano. The prominent American conductor, Marian Alsop, who studied with Leonard Bernstein, gave a wonderful description of him in an interview. She said, Bernstein was impossibly brilliant in so many different areas, a genius conductor, composer, author, pianist, thinker, activist, educator, and entertainer. But for me, his genius was in connecting the dots between all of these. Everything he read and experienced influenced everything he thought and did. I think he once said that he didn't know whether he loved music or people more. He had passion, enthusiasm, and intense and boundless curiosity about our world. Bernstein did not think about education and music as being separate entities. For him, they were part of a systemic, organic, whole-person educational approach. Without doubt, Leonard Bernstein was one of the most significant and influential musical personalities of the 20th century, and certainly one of the most successful musicians in American history. He was the recipient of many honors, 17 Grammy Awards, 11 Emmy Awards, 1 Tony Award, and the Lifetime Achievement and the Kennedy Center honor. He studied at Harvard and at the Curtis Institute of Music. Conductors Dimitri Mitropoulos, Fritz Reiner, and Sergei Kusevitsky were major influences and mentors in his life. Bernstein called composer Aaron Copland his only real composition teacher. Bernstein wrote in many styles, including symphonic and orchestral music, ballet, film, and theater music, choral works, opera, chamber music, and works for piano. His best-known work, the Broadway musical West Side Story, continues to be regularly performed worldwide. We are closing tonight's concert with his work for voice and piano, La Bonne Cuisine, a charming take on 4 recipes from the 1899 cookbook, Fine French Cooking by Émile Dumont.
250 grammes de raisin de Malaga, 250 grammes de raisin de Corinthe, raisin de Corinthe, 250 grammes de graisse de rognon de bœuf et 125 grammes de mie de pain imité, de pain imité. 60 grammes de sucre empoudré en de consommade, en verre d'aller, en demi-verre de rhum, en de devine, 3 œufs, un citron, muscade et gingembre, cannelle en poudre mélangée en tout la moitié d'une cuillère à café, c'est le fun, la moitié d'une cuillère à café. La queue de bœuf n'est pas jamais au dédaignée. D'abord, avec assez de queue de bœuf, on peut faire un pot-au-feu ensemble. Les queues qui ont servi à faire le pot-au-feu peuvent être mangées, panées et grillées et servies avec une sauce piquante ou tomate. La queue de bœuf n'est pas jamais à dédaigner. Taouk gang 6, poitrine de poule. Faites bouillir une poule dont vous prendrez les blancs, vous les pelerez de façon à ce qu'ils se mettent en charpille. Puis mêlez-les avec une bouillie comme celle ci-dessus, comme celle ci-dessus. Du le pressé, voici en manière de confectionner un civet de lièvre que je recommande. Dépecez le lièvre comme pour le civet ordinaire, mettez-le dans une casserole ou un chaudron avec son sang et son foie écrasé. Un demi-livre de poitrine de porc coupé en morceaux, une vingtaine de petits oignons, un peu de sel et poivre, 1,5 litre de vin rouge. Faites bouillir à toute vitesse, faites bouillir à toute vitesse. Au bout de 15 minutes environ, lorsque la sauce est réduite de moitié, approchez un papier enflammé de manière à mettre le feu au ragoût. Lorsqu'il sera